10 Facts about George Washington. George Washington, who was referred to as the father of our country, was an interesting man. As the nation's first president in accordance with the Constitution, Washington played a unique role in the Revolution as a military leader, the head of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, and a national leader. Washington was largely the president when Article 2 of the Constitution was written, and he was the only candidate who ran unopposed for office. Political parties, those annoying rival factions that appeared when the country had to deal with life without George, were created in America as Washington's second term was coming to an end. When Washington left his position as president in 1797, there was a huge void. These additional Washington facts help put his extraordinary public career in perspective. Number 1. Washington was mostly self-educated. There wasn't much money left over after the death of George Washington's father in 1743 to pay for his 11-year-old son's formal education. Washington's formal education ended when he was 15 years old, but he never stopped seeking knowledge. He read to improve himself as a soldier, farmer, and president. He corresponded with writers and friends in Europe and America and shared ideas that fueled the political, social, and agricultural revolutions of his time. Number 2. Washington's bold actions saved the American Revolution, twice. By December 1776, the Continental Army and the Patriot cause appeared to be on the verge of extinction following a string of devastating defeats in New York and New Jersey. General Washington had a completely different strategy in mind than the majority of generals, who would have retreated to the safety of winter quarters. On December 25, 1776, his daring counterattack across the ice-covered Delaware River resulted in 3 consecutive battlefield victories and a stunning strategic turnabout that boosted American morale and saved the fledgling country. Early in 1781, with the Revolution once more on the verge of defeat, Washington began a perilous march south to encircle and assault Lord Cornwallis' British Army at Yorktown, Virginia. The war's turning point came in October 1781 with Washington's victory at Yorktown. Number 3. He was fearless in battle. At the Battle of the Monongahela on July 9, 1755, George Washington rode forward to take command of the crumbling lines as men and officers were being killed all around him. Washington had 2 horses shot out from under him and 4 bullet holes shot through his coat as he rode along the ranks trying to steady the men. Washington rode forward on his white charger as he led his soldiers in a successful counterattack against the British at the Battle of Princeton. Washington was a simple target because, at one point, he was only 30 yards from the British line. Washington was heard telling his troops, "Parade with me, my fine fellows. We will have them soon," despite widespread fears that he would be shot down at any second. Number 4. Washington owned more than 50,000 acres and was an ardent promoter of westward expansion. George Washington was allegedly the wealthiest president in American history. In the western regions of Virginia and what is now West Virginia, as well as in Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, Kentucky, and the Ohio region, Washington owned more than 50,000 acres. Washington had a keen understanding of how an expansion into Western territory would not only enrich the new nation but also strengthen the country as a whole long before Lewis and Clark began their journey westward. Washington envisioned a continental transportation system that would enable the future output of the Ohio Valley to flow easily to Atlantic ports by connecting the headwaters of the west-flowing Ohio and the east-flowing Potomac. Even Washington's decision to locate the nation's capital along the Potomac River's banks was made to emphasize this westward orientation. Number 5. Washington never abused his power. Washington is best known for his roles as a general and president, but his willingness to cede power may be his most lasting contribution. Washington officially established civilian control of the military on December 23, 1783, when he strode into the Maryland State House in Annapolis and turned in his military commission to Congress. King George III reportedly said, "He would be the greatest man in the world if he did this," when he learned that Washington would give up his commission. Washington resigned as president at the end of his second term, breaking a significant precedent that persisted until the middle of the 20th century, at a time when there were no term limits and many people would have supported a lifetime position. Number 6. Washington was first to sign the United States Constitution. George Washington saw firsthand the serious flaws in the Articles of Confederation during the American Revolution. Washington traveled to Philadelphia in 1787 to take part in a convention that was convened to make suggestions for changes to the Confederation. He was unanimously selected to serve as the 4-month-long Constitutional Convention's chairman. Few delegates were more determined to create a government with real power and authority than him, despite the fact that he spoke very little during the convention. Washington also had the honor of being the first to sign this constitution because he was the convention's president. Number 7. Washington loved parties and the company of women. Washington was actually a man who enjoyed entertainment and other people's company, despite the fact that many people perceive him as a stoic and distant figure. There are numerous stories about him dancing until the wee hours at different balls, cotillions, and parties. He had a passion for theater and saw numerous plays over the course of his life. And in an era when relations between the sexes were marked by stiff 18th-century formality, Washington was regarded as a woman-to-woman communicator who was interested and engaged. Number 8. Washington was a true agricultural innovator and pioneer. Washington showed a keen interest in and an eye for practical technologies of all kinds throughout his life. He made a name for himself as an inventive farmer, switching in the 1760s from tobacco to wheat as his primary cash crop. He diligently experimented with new crops, fertilizers, crop rotation, tools, and livestock breeding in an effort to enhance his farming operation. Washington became a leading breeder and promoter of the American mule by using a fine donkey that the King of Spain sent to him as a gift. Washington ratified the patent for a novel automated mill technology while serving as president. He installed the automated mill technology developed by Oliver Evans in his gristmill because he was intrigued by the design. He also had time to create a brand new, 2-story, 16-sided threshing barn that greatly facilitated the separation of wheat from chaff. Number 9. Washington is the only slave-owning president who freed all of his slaves. When George Washington was 11 years old, he inherited his first set of slaves. As he grew older and especially as he fought for liberty in the American Revolution, Washington's views on slavery gradually changed. Approximately 123 of the slaves owned by him were set free according to his will, and as required by law, his estate paid for the care of former slaves at Mount Vernon for many years after his death. The only president who owned slaves and freed every one of them was George Washington. Number 10. He was elected president unanimously, 2 times. Washington was the ideal candidate for president due to his leadership during the Revolution and Constitutional Convention, impeccable character, and demonstrated willingness to not abuse power. Some people's worries about the emergence of an American monarchy were even allayed by the fact that he had no biological children. Washington won the votes of all 10 eligible states in the first election, which took place in 1789. In 1792, Washington won every one of the 15 states by receiving all 132 electoral votes. There you have our 10 facts about George Washington. Thanks for watching and please subscribe for more videos.